I just want to set out the stage by saying that I'm a strong proponent for the use of AI, especially responsible and ethical use of AI. But in our current understanding, given the extent of use of AI tools and their capabilities, currently AI tools are great assistants that can significantly, help humans improve their efficiencies, and even in certain instances, built upon human expertise. But they're currently not to be treated as autonomous gatekeepers.
Welcome back to Insights Exchange, where we explore the big ideas, bold innovations, and shifting systems that power scholarly publishing. I'm your host, Nikesh Gosalia. I came across a striking statistic about retractions that I had to share with everyone. In 2023, more than 10,000 research papers were retracted, setting a new record, and the surge has been attributed to increased use of AI-powered tools that help detect issues like image or data manipulation. There's been more chatter lately about many more papers being pulled as well. Is this a clear sign that AI is improving and catching up on human manipulation tactics used in the earlier days of AI? It seems so. AI is quietly transforming how we monitor research integrity, but here's the million-dollar question. Can AI actually catch flaws better than humans? Or are we overestimating what it can do? To help us unpack this, I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Dr. Chhavi Chauhan. Dr. Chauhan is a scientist, ethicist, entrepreneur, and globally recognized voice at the intersection of research integrity, publishing, and responsible AI adoption. She brings a rare blend of domain expertise and deep ethical insights into how technology is reshaping the editorial process. In today's conversation, we'll explore how AI is being used to detect flaws in research, from plagiarism and image duplication to subtle forms of misconduct. We'll talk about risks, rewards, and what a truly responsible human plus AI model might look like. I'm extremely excited. I'm sure the listeners would be as well. Welcome to the show, Chhavi.
Well, thank you so much, Nikesh. And those are some startling statistics you opened up with. Very thought-provoking.
Yes, absolutely. I think, to be honest, obviously we knew about this being within the industry, but when you look at a more holistic picture and when you look at the stat, I think it's just astounding. And, thank you once again for your time. I've seen you in many panel discussions. I've seen you on stage. We very briefly, got an opportunity to meet at SSP as well. And I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show today.
Likewise, Nikesh. Thank you for the opportunity.
Brilliant. So let's start with the big one. Are AI tools really better than humans when it comes to detecting flaws or misconduct in research papers? Where do they excel in your opinion, and where are the blind spots?
Yeah, that's an excellent question to get started. But just to level set, Nikesh, I just want to set out the stage by saying that I'm a strong proponent for the use of AI, especially responsible and ethical use of AI. But in our current understanding, given the extent of use of AI tools and their capabilities, currently AI tools are great assistants that can significantly, help humans improve their efficiencies, and even in certain instances, built upon human expertise. But they're currently not to be treated as autonomous gatekeepers. I want to just start by saying out that, definitely, undeniably, two strengths of AI would be to help with the speed and scale. There no refuting that, irrespective of the domain that you're in, the capabilities that AI have to scale pattern recognition, for example, or even to determine things, which could, like the mundane things that we do in our editorial offices that consume so much time. AI can do that at scale super fast. So speed is one, and then pattern recognition at scale is another. So you asked about whether it can detect flaws or misconduct in scientific papers. And better than the human reviewers or editors? Well, there are definitely strengths in case of, we've been using Authenticate, for example, for a long time. So in plagiarism detection, and there are other tools also available like Turnitin. At ASIP Managed Journals, we are now using Proofig as one of the tools for determining image manipulation. And ImageTwin is another example. There's a whole array of forensic tools that are available through the Office of Research Integrity, and those definitely help determine scientific misconduct or plagiarism at a scale that humans would not be able to do. One other thing that I personally believe in my understanding, and something that I would think we lack in editorial office spaces, is reviewers who can assess the statistical rigor of a particular methodology, because there are so many different statistical models. Given your sample size, there could be differences. So I think that's another strength of AI in augmenting our understanding of the statistical rigor of an article, which we couldn't do. And again, there are many tools available. Grim is one, StatCheck is another, that could easily help us evaluate the statistical rigor. If you're thinking about fabricated text detection, humans may not be able to do that at scale, but AI can easily do it. And when we are talking about editorial office spaces, for example, it's there's no denying, editorial office is stretched thin. We have limited number of personnel. We are constantly inundated with queries, and they're just too much mundane tasks to do. So I think that is something that takes a backseat. Even as a reviewer, when I'm reviewing manuscripts, there are a limited number of manuscripts that I see. So there could be some fabricated content which may go unnoticed in my peer review process. And AI would do a very good job of flagging that. And of course, there should be a human in the loop, a human with oversight who would go back to assess whether that flag is real or not. But that's something which is a strength of AI that we as humans lack, in our peer review process, for example. One thing I'm a strong proponent of, and I see like over the course of time, we see more and more citations coming up when we see submissions coming in the articles. And there is a real concern about citation stacking, or even inclusion of, irrelevant citations in certain places where people just want to insert them with, when they have ulterior motives of trying to oversight their work or those of the peers. And they may get easily unnoticed, when we're talking about human reviewers. So that is something, again, that AI can do. So there certainly a whole array of things that AI can do better than human reviewers, but the current AI tools definitely fall short many levels. One of the major ones being the fact that all AI tools are trained on published literature, and I think we've heard, like all of us, all the listeners would have heard this before, that the tools lack creativity or novelty on their own. And that is something very peculiar and unique to humans, right? So if we are looking at AI tools for maybe evaluating how sound the hypothesis is, there could be limitations given the limitations of the training data sets, right? If it's a very novel concept or hypothesis someone is testing, for example, in certain cases, even if we are evaluating methodologies that could be questionable using AI tools, if those methodologies are something really new that, the AI model had not seen before, for example. And I feel like there is really no comparison to a human expert's domain knowledge that is definitely lacking in training AI models. So when we think about the contextual, variables that may be there in a particular manuscript, especially when we're looking at the discussions or if we're looking at conclusions, if they're logically drawn out. So AI may not be able to do a good job of evaluating that part. And even, thinking about whether or not the discussion is within the paradigm, or in case the authors are proposing something really paradigm shifting that is entirely outside the scope of the AI to evaluate because it has never seen or it has not been trained on those novel concepts yet. And I mean, of course, I'm an ethicist, so I always think about everything in the perspective of ethical nuances. They could be like, you could train the AI, but when it comes to, nuanced authorship attribution, for example, or determining these specific conflicts of interest. And I'll just give you an example. Like we may look at institutional conflicts of interest, for example, when we are assigning reviewers or something, and maybe you can train the AI to do that. But when we are looking at broader concerns surrounding us, for example, if there is a war ongoing between Ukraine and Russia, for example, and you have article coming from one part of the world and a reviewer from the other part of the world, which could be at dissonance, with each other, a human editor would immediately determine that it may not be the best match to match a reviewer to an article coming from, a Ukrainian author and a Russian reviewer, for example. And it's something that we just kind of decisions we make on the spot. But unless you provide those parameters to the AI tools or train it, and those features are included, it would never even think about those kind of concerns or conflicts of interest, for example. I'm not so sure about this. I have yet to see robust examples where AI can rigorously evaluate the ethical use of animal models. I mean, I see that a lot in our manuscripts because they're human cell lines, cultured cells that are used, or we're using different animal models, and they're robust statements of ethical use of the animal models. So that's something I think that could be limiting. And absolutely, hands down, evaluation of novel methodologies, because AI does not have visionary thinking.
Got it. Yeah. So no, thank you so much, Chhavi. I think that really contextualizes. And a couple of immediate questions that came to my mind within our industry, because you have sat on the other side, which is in the seat of decision making. When these new tools, new startups emerge, almost every week we are hearing of somebody starting, and which is great in many ways. But what are the most important parameters to keep in mind when you want to really try a tool? Then think about maybe kind of taking it to the others in the team. There is already a lot of skepticism around it. Which one really stands out over others? What can you implement? I'm just kind of trying to think, maybe because you're on the other side and you've seen this, and I'm sure people are approaching you in almost every week. I mean, yeah, what feedback or what inputs do you have for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a loaded question, Nikesh. There's so much that goes around, and you're absolutely right about us seeing just a plethora of tools coming up, right? Because oftentimes I'm even thinking about, okay, so yes, just because we can build a tool, we don't have to build a tool. Is there a necessity to do that? And when you think about the current sort of pressured scholarly publishing landscape, it's shifting, it's evolving. We are losing support every single day as we speak here, right? So people are really limited in their extent of using and testing these tools, which should be affordable for the editorial offices and the associations and the journals, right? So I think the first and foremost concern for me, and I'm also, I work for a not for profit, is first and foremost the utility of the tool, how useful it's gonna be for me. What kind of work, like, is it gonna save our personnel time? So, they have the energy and bandwidth to do some other things that they were supposed to do? Or is it just gonna create more work? When we talk about AI tools, creating a bunch of flags, we still need a human in the loop to be able to assess those flags, the validity of those flags, and then determine the next set of questions that need to be addressed to respond to those flags. And then what should be the final decision based on those. I think from the AI perspective, I am a strong proponent of trustworthy AI and explainable AI. So, what kind of data sets were used in training a model, right? So, I'm in a publishing of health science journals. And we know that most of the models, the foundational models that are out there, the content that they're trained on are from scientific journals. But the listeners who may be coming from social science journals or humanities journals, I think they may have to ask this question whether or not adequate representation of those domains was there in the training data set. So the output that will come out of these AI tools would apply as or will be as applicable to their content as a scientific journal, for example. Then I think about the disciplines. You have to agree, Nikesh, each one of the medical journals, they're heavy on jargon. So, and the jargon may mean something in one discipline, but it may mean something very different in the other discipline. So again, assessing whether the AI performs well against the training data set for different disciplines, especially for bigger organizations that may be publishing journals in different domains, different disciplines, different streams. So that is very important. Then explainability, right? So what kind of data went in if your model is proposing an output? It is creating some flags, for example, for a human to check. Then what was the reasoning behind creating those flags? Or what is the level of accuracy or sensitivity? Maybe there's a 40% overlap, but maybe there's a 99% overlap. And for the human to understand, what does that mean, right? So I think the two most important ones are trust and explainability. On top of that, of course, there's like a whole array of layers, especially when you talk about bias. And I think that's one thing that comes forward whenever people are talking about AI. So AI data sets, and bias. And according to Wikipedia, the bias codex, there are 108 different kinds of biases. And to me, I would like to say that I think these biases are also emerging as the tools are emerging, right? If you're thinking about the humans that are annotating the data sets to begin with, so we may be annotating those data sets with a bias. So we are introducing certain biases. If you think about how we are building the tools and sort of moving forward from those, I would say we have to think about confirmation bias, because over the course of time, the AI is generating output. And as humans, as we start relying on the AI tools more and more, we get used to, and as the tools get better, they become more reliable. We agree to what the tools are suggesting us, instead of like diving deeper to maybe question whether or not all those results are that accurate. And then we start propagating that confirmation bias. So there are many things to consider when evaluating these new tools. But since we are in the business of scholarly publishing where trust and rigor is paramount, I think the most important things for us to go back to when looking at these tools would be whether or not they're explainable, and also whether they perform as well as, the makers of these AI tools are sort of recommending, or, they're standing behind it. Because when you change different data sets, and that's something that we have seen a lot in specialty medical disciplines for AI tools, even if it's like determining the extent of a particular kind of cancer, for example, if your representative population was different and now you're testing the tool, on a different population, their performance or sensitivity may vary. So how good are they for your data set, or how applicable they could be broadly for generic data sets rather than for the specialty, or how accurate could they be for a given specialty? And I feel like the manufacturers of these products or generators or the startups that we are talking about here should really build a framework of how the models work, how well they perform, and sort of have an algorithmic accountability framework. So over the course of time, as the data set on which they're testing these models or rolling them out, not just, the data set it got trained on, how well are they performing? And are there any risks that we see any specific types of biases in certain circumstances, that we see that these tools are misperforming or malfunctioning? And if so, what can be done to mitigate those risks? And sort of auditing in the sense how good or bad the performance stays over time, what's the nature of the data set that's evolving, and then who should even be informed should there be a misperformance, and how should people down the chain be informed about it? What are the steps that should be taken? So I think the process is a lot more nuanced. I think what we are seeing right now in our industry, there are quite a few startups, and they're usually partnering up with other players. So it could be big publishers, it could be big associations. They can also test their model on different data sets and sort of like audit in a controlled environment as they adapt and retrain models in certain cases and then roll them out. I do know of a few products that have been in beta testing for the longest time because I think the startups are very mindful about not rolling out something till they are comfortable about their models being responsible. So I think that's a very responsible approach, especially in scholarly publishing, because it's got a backfire. And we've seen instances of things backfiring when it's blown up on social media for the right reasons. But I think putting that intentionality of building trust and making the models explainable is paramount.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to meet again, as you're talking about this, Chhavi, I think I'm just getting some questions in my mind because you're so much on the road, because you are part of panel discussions, conferences. What is your general sense in terms of how is our industry looking at AI? And obviously there are academics, there are people who really focus, on quality. I don't want to demean anyone, but it could be that sometimes folks are very old school and everything has to be done only in a certain manner. So are you seeing a changing trend where folks are more open to exploring, are more updated with everything that's happening in the industry or in general as well? Or are you getting a feeling that they're still skeptical, they're lost? So yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's just still remains a relevant question, Nikesh. Like I've heard that question for the last 2 years, and I constantly assess myself of what's the state of our acceptance level to the AI coming from different perspectives, especially because the domain is so big, right? With so many nuanced roles throughout the value chain. So we have come a long way in the last couple of years. Since when ChatGPT came out, we were all like, okay, not gonna do this. This is something you have to stay away from. And of course, you can't because the authors are gonna use it. There are so many reported instances of the reviewers using it, despite the fact that the journals didn't approve the usage of a particular, large language model or any of those models. Those guidelines was missing. But I think we all very fast, very soon came to terms with the fact that Gen AI is here to stay. Large language models and AI tools are gonna integrate into our workflows in many ways, and people are gonna use it no matter what. So we have to come up with guidelines for the usage of these tools, responsible use of these tools, as well as guidelines for reporting the use to build that transparency, as well as, processes, putting frameworks in place on how we're going to assess the use of these tools to build that trust that we talk about between authors and publishers. We're definitely not there yet. Like in so many of my conversations, there are authors who are intensely using Gen AI, from the time that they're trying to conceptualize an idea or, to put a skeleton, a framework for the article that they want to write about, or to do pre-checks before submission because they want to give their paper a higher chance of going to the reviewers for the science, for the content, and not get bogged down, the reviewers not getting bogged down by the format or lack of compliance of the format, for example. So that's happening. And I have seen so many of these authors being responsible in reporting the use of Gen AI. So we did a check and they take the responsibility that whether or not they were using, closed models or they were using an open source model, they will specify which foundational model or tool that they used. So I think those are all great steps. There's a huge debate about the use of AI in peer review, and that would be like a whole discussion in itself, but things are evolving there as well. So to answer your question, I still see a spectrum of usage of AI. There are still certain editors, and this is one of the largest publishers that came to me, I want to say 3 weeks ago, that they wanted to host a session to generate awareness about the use of AI tools amongst their editors and even, their editorial staff, because there's so many people who are not ready to use it yet. And to me, it was very surprising because it's one of the biggest establishments when you talk about publishing industry, and they have thousands of folks in staff. They have their own AI setup. So I think we still haven't done enough in terms of making people aware about the utility of the AI tools. And we have to bring in IT folks and technologists to let them know about how to responsibly leverage content, which could be proprietary in many cases. And just for them to play around, and experiment with these tools to see how much they can benefit from using them if they do it right. So, I have written a bunch of guest editorials that have been published, blog posts to promote the use of some of the AI tools, even use instances. The workshop that I'm conducting at ISMTE is going to be a similar example where we have different segments within the publishing process where people can get a hands-on experience on using AI tools, and not just one, but multiple different tools, different foundational models to get a sense of what can be accomplished. So yeah, there's a range. We're far from just using a blanket approach or me coming to you, oh, you know how to use it, so let's just do it, because there are people who haven't even generated a prompt yet, which is sad in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. Like you correctly mentioned, I think you very nicely explained. I think when Gen AI came in, everyone was like, nah, we don't need to use it. This is just one more shiny tool. After that, obviously, we've seen there is no escaping from it because others and the many other stakeholders are using it. And there are certain advantages to it. But I still feel, and I would agree with you, I still feel, a lot of folks are still grappling with the developments that are happening. They still potentially might not have a starting point. There are big question marks around ethics. And I think that's where all the work that you're doing and your expertise and also, the write-ups that you're doing will be extremely helpful. So, yeah, I'll take those offline from you and make sure we
Absolutely.
share those. Yeah. There's also one area where there's a growing debate, which is, should AI be integrated, before peer review, during it, or even, partially replace parts of it? And as we've seen in many other industries, in our industry, we're seeing more startups talking about it, more entrepreneurs exploring that area. What's your take on where AI truly belongs in the editorial workflow? Maybe specific to peer review as well, but otherwise also.
So that is definitely a critical and timely discussion. And I think the peer review congress that's happening later this year is going to exclusively focus on that topic, just because there is so much discussion happening in our industry surrounding that. So Nikesh, I already mentioned this one time that it would be great for the authors to use it for the pre-submission process to be able to increase their chances of actually having the reviewers focus on their science instead of turning down their manuscripts because it does not meet the stylistic or format needs for a journal. And unfortunately, I have seen it in our own settings when certain reviewers are like, we were so bogged down by the way the manuscript was laid out that it's difficult to evaluate what they're even trying to present, right? We see this a lot from non-native English speaking authors because when they write, they write with a different mindset, a different language, or a different culture in their mind. So the content that they write does not accurately sometimes relay the messaging, the scientific messaging. So if the authors can do pre-manuscript submission check of sorts to massage the language so it makes a little bit more sense to the reviewers, I think they can benefit significantly in getting it reviewed for the actual content that they're presenting instead of the style, right? In many instances, especially from non-native English-speaking authors again, they have a tendency to copy-paste, for example, their methods. There's not much you can do in changing the way you write the methods, but at the same time, you could modify. If they're building upon their previous finding, they may just start putting their own text from a previous paper, and that is detected as plagiarism in peer review system because now everyone is using plagiarism detection tools that are integrated within the system. So then again, it reflects negatively on the author. So maybe if they can do a check like that ahead of time, and then they can polish the presentation a little bit, I think that would be very beneficial. Sometimes, and I talked about use of statistically relevant AI tools, and I think it's very embarrassing and it's also very unfortunate when a study is turned down because one of the reviewers determines the statistical approach you use does not provide the rigor needed for that data set or was not the right or accurate even method for determination or coming to a conclusion that they're, pushing forward. So in those circumstances, I think if these tools are leveraged by the authors, they can not only validate that their study is well done, and at the same time, they can advocate for it and make it more robust by focusing on what is the next step. So definitely in pre-submission, there are several places where AI tools can be beneficial. I think the big elephant in the room is the use of AI tools within the peer review process. And that debate has been heating up over the course of time. But I still feel like there is a place for the use of AI tools within peer review process. So I'm a strong proponent of human in the loop. Like at the beginning of the discussion when we started talking, I mentioned about focusing on human expertise. Having that contextual knowledge or being able to be creative, being able to be identify what is novel and actually acknowledge that and be able to evaluate the manuscript for what it's worth really by having that domain expertise that AI tools don't currently have. But having said that, there's so many things that a human reviewer cannot do or see. When we think about paper mill content, for example, our offices are inundated by those. And sheerly by way of, pattern recognition at scale, especially if we are part of collaborative communities where the AI gets to see articles coming in on different platforms, I think we can stop that, right? Even before it sort of inundates our offices. So that's something in peer review process that we cannot do without AI anymore. I did mention about citation stacking. So one of the things that I do as a reviewer, I always look for self-published, citations to assess because some people just have maybe out of 100 references, 25 are their own, right? And of course, when you're building on a bolus of work that you have done, you are the expert in the field, that could be a possibility. But at the same time, there should be objectivity in you representing the work of other people in the field who are also advancing the field in various ways, right? So citation stacking or use of inserting certain citations from the peers, for example, these are the patterns that human reviewers, not all of them, would focus on. And AI can very easily do that. So I think that's a wonderful usage. I did talk about the statistical rigor. So if the authors may not do it, having a tool which is integrated with your system to determine statistical rigor would be wonderful. Like we constantly looking for an editor with statistics background, and we don't always have those. I think one of the major things, and I think in the older days, it was another topic of great discussion, was the scarcity of reviewers or matching reviewers, for example. And you're limited by the pool of reviewers that you have in your database. If you're using a big publisher database, maybe you have better chances. And if it's linked out to Scopus or something, maybe you have higher chances. But at the same time, when you're looking for either specialties or specialties that are in high demand. So if you think about infectious disease editor at the time of COVID-19 pandemic, right? There were 50% of the articles that we were getting were something to do with COVID-19, but those were the reviewers who were busy working, figuring out COVID-19. So in those instances, if you can match the manuscript to a particular set of reviewers to be able to identify someone who may be available, I think that would be a great resource in peer review process. I mean, this is another thing I look about when folks are writing things, and I'm a peer reviewer. If attribution is given to everything that the author is claiming, and oftentimes their citations just missing, we just understand the field, and I can close my eyes and write a paragraph about what's the state of a particular thing, in my domain. But then where's the attribution? So I think those missing citations could easily be flagged by AI that human reviewers may just overlook because, they're experts and they agree to that one paragraph that was provided by the author but was lacking attribution. So I think that could be another great use of using AI tools for for identifying missing citations in peer review.
Yeah, got it. And being both a scientist and an ethicist, I'm curious, does heavy reliance on AI risk de-skilling the human reviewers in the long term? Could it lead to editorial complacency? Could it lead to, for lack of a better term, shortcuts being taken, other issues creeping in?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. And it's something I think about. And my answer to that is going to be it depends. It really depends on the context. So just thinking about, we didn't have the GPS long back. I would still rely on a map to go somewhere or have markers or milestones that I follow. But now I'm so attuned to using the GPS that I don't even think about the path I'm taking, but I'm getting there, right? So is it de-skilling in the sense that I am not paying attention to the landmarks or not remembering the routes? Or just think about it being a little bit more efficient. I can do other things and I don't have to bog myself down, right? So I think there is a huge potential to use AI for skilling the new breed of professionals. So I think the de-skilling really sticks out to me when we are thinking about young career professionals. And it's sort of like a little difficult for me to think like having been trained a certain way, what would have happened had I not been trained that way? Because, you become intuitive to certain things that you capture that if your training was different, you would not have captured before, right? So for example, if we're talking about peer review and you have so much assistance from the AI tools and you really start heavily relying on the tools because over time they have gotten better, you may stop questioning the credibility of those tools or to critically analyze the content to even form a different opinion. And in that particular instance, I would say this professional has been de-skilled. But if you flip the coin and you generate AI tools, like for example, if what are some of the parameters you would have considered to train a young career professional to become a good reviewer? Trains the person as these are the things you should focus on. So, what's the premise? How solid is the hypothesis based on all of your knowledge of the literature so far? Do you think it stands ground? So, if you're looking at discussion, is it something peripheral, like an AI generated genetic summary of what the field could be, or based on your own experiments happening in your lab, discussions happening within your lab, in your lab unit, within your domain at conferences, how well does it stand? If the authors are proposing something, now from the AI tools knowledge, it means nothing. But from your knowledge and as an emerging expert in that domain, what value would you attribute to that? How does it change your thinking? How does it shift the paradigm? What are the new questions that it would lay foundation for? So I think then you're really skilling the person instead of de-skilling. So I think it's very context dependent. One of the journals I work with is a pathology journal, and there were a whole bunch of publications we published when these several AI tools for grading different kinds of diseases in different stages, for example, came out. And the initial studies were telling how the trained pathologists would be much better. Their performance was better than the AI tools, but those of the trainees was, worse than the AI tools. So the AI tool was somewhere in between. And of course, these tools have evolved in the last 2-3 years. But if a trainee had to rely heavily on the tools, then they never get that intuition or learning or that, I think, grasp on the context that would actually train them to become that better pathologist. And of course, as you see more and more cases, you get better. Like we're all learning and gaining wisdom as we grow old. That's the only reason why I want to grow old. I think, yeah. So de-skilling is a yes and a no, depends on the context. But I still believe that we can use AI tools to continue to skill the individuals instead of relying blindly on them, and that which may eventually, result in people being de-skilled. And that would be a small fragment of people.
Right. Yeah. I think very, very nicely answered.
Thank you.
And from my perspective, probably the most important and something that I'm sure you've thought about, but you've been asked many, many times, that let's imagine the future. And so, from your perspective, what would be an ideal human plus AI model for research quality control? What would a responsible yet effective and also ethical partnership between, say, all the stakeholders, but specifically editors and algorithms, actually look like?
Yeah. So again, coming from an ethicist perspective, it has to be a responsible mix of both. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a strong proponent of for the responsible use of AI tools because they improve our efficiencies. They even make us better experts to the extent that we don't even realize yet. And they open up so many more avenues for us to explore that we didn't have before just because we were just so, I guess, busy with the mundane. So the best possible scenario in my mind is AI tools working closely with humans, definitely with human in the loop, human oversight. So I'm thinking AI tool as a co-pilot, not as an autonomous agent decision maker, right? So there should be like a process check, or I'm gonna say pre-screenings, so to speak, using AI tools, and then a human being able to assess the rigor of these flags or output that the AI generated, and then of course a human making the final decision. Thinking, just putting my ethicist hat on, I talked about trust, I talked about explainability. We talked about audit in our discussion. So when we think about starting to leverage AI tools in our everyday lives, in the scholarly publishing processes, I think we have to constantly validate their performance. We need to set up a framework when we could audit how well they're doing as not just the training data sets, but the actual user data sets change. And to be able to have governance mechanisms in place. So if there is some kind of a misperformance, an unintended, use case, then we can assess what happened in that particular scenario, make the model explainable again, go back to tweaking it if needed, and informing the stakeholders that will get affected by the misperformance, for example. So definitely making them more transparent, trustable, auditable, explainable. And I'm thinking we talked about human skills. So I don't think there is any replacing the human skills completely. I mean, if I have to go north just by telling, the position of the sun, I can still continue to go in the right direction without a map, right? Even if I'm like relying heavily on a map, but like broadly speaking. So always keeping human in the loop, letting human be the expert who makes the decisions by way of having the domain expertise, having that contextual knowledge, and being able to weigh in on any of the ethical nuances that are lost on AI. And I mean, I'm a strong proponent of inclusivity. So I think I would want to just, wrap up by saying, as we are building these AI tools to work with human, to augment them in certain ways, we should definitely focus on making them more inclusive and ethical by design so we can just trust them as we move forward.
Yeah. Just one last thought or a question that popped in my mind is that how do you keep yourself motivated? I mean, things like inclusivity, things like disseminating knowledge, things like working for a not for profit, it needs intrinsic motivation, right? I mean, not everyone can do that, although a lot of people have good intentions. But whether we like it or no, we live in a world where yeah, it is capitalistic. It is something where your focus is very short and narrow. Sometimes it's just give and take kind of relations. So yeah, what motivates you? I mean, what keeps you going to kind of give so much back to people and teach them? And yeah, because it's very motivational.
Oh, thank you so much, Nikesh. That means a lot to me. And I would say two words: community and family support, right? So I think this passion to give back or the passion to be a proponent of inclusivity, which is very challenging right now, at least in the US, it sort of comes collectively from the communities that I'm part of because everyone is so motivated. So of course there are times when you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall and you get together with your community and you may even, talk about it, but then the next day is a new day. If you do not bring about the needed change, who will, right? So my biggest motivational factor has been my daughter. She's about to turn 9 end of August. And when she was born, I just thought there were not enough role models for her to look up to. And this world was not equitable, especially for a female child to become what she may want to, So I want her to dream big and I want her to be able to see that it's doable. So I think all these small little changes that we are bringing about, hopefully they'll amount to something big by the time she's ready to, start living her dream. And you're right about the capitalistic mindset and us having means to even be happy in our everyday life. So I'm very thankful to a very supportive husband. And he works for big tech. And there are certain times when he's like under so much stress, but he's like, why don't you go chase your passions? And somebody's got to make the money. So I think just having that family support and from my mother-in-law who believes in me more than she believes in her own son and is always there to support me. I think passion is good, but you can't solely follow passion. There are other things that hold us back. But having the support from several communities and family has been the driving force in my case.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I mean, yes, of course, passion only doesn't take you there, but there is a lot of credibility and genuinity in what you do,
Thank you.
and that comes through. I mean, we've had a few conversations only, but I can already see that, and even today, you're talking with so much of passion, so much of depth, so much of natural interest. It's not superficial, and I think that's truly motivational. So yeah.
Thank you, Nikesh.
Brilliant. So, very insightful conversation with Dr. Chhavi Chauhan. We have explored the real and sometimes uncomfortable questions around the use of AI in peer review and research integrity. While the tools are evolving fast, Chhavi reminded us that ethics, transparency, and human oversight must evolve alongside them. A huge thank you to you, Dr. Chauhan, for joining us and helping us see both the promising side and the pitfalls of AI in academic publishing particularly. If this conversation sparked ideas or concerns, I'd love to hear from you. I always enjoy a good conversation on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me there and join the discussion or drop a comment on any of my posts. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share insights exchange with your colleagues. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep pushing the boundaries of research.